You're watching CxO Disruptors and I'm your host, Sandeep Saujani. Today we're speaking with Graham Stokhuyzen, co-founder of Ventures at Coca-Cola Europacific Partners. Graham leads the Ventures arm of CCEP, focused on partnering with innovative startups to solve industry problems. Ventures catalyses the growth of these businesses through investment, academic funding and commercial relationships. Graham, fantastic to have you here today. Could you tell us a bit more about CCEP just to get us started?
Yeah, of course. So thanks very much for inviting me along. So CCEP is the Coca-Cola's largest bottler in the world. So we're responsible for making, moving and selling many of the beverage brands that hopefully you're familiar with. So whether it's Coca-Cola, Fanta, Sprite, Smart Water, Capri-Sun. So effectively wherever you can buy one of those beverages, we're generally responsible for getting it there.
And what's the purpose of the Ventures arm?
Yeah, so CCEP Ventures was born in 2019. We were set up to bring the best minds, ideas, technologies, innovation from the outside world into the business. So we identified 4 areas where we felt technology could play a real part in shaping the way we do business. And Ventures was set up to go out and find that innovation, bring it into the business, and then help it scale to solve those problems. So when we started up in 2019, we sat down with our CEO, our CFO, a few of our senior stakeholders, and just had a conversation about where did we see the real structural challenges and opportunities facing the business. And not surprisingly, they fell out in areas that you might imagine. So firstly, in the area of sustainability. So obviously we sat here with COP26 happening at the moment. First and foremost, there's a challenge and opportunity for us around packaging and packaging sustainability. So that was our kind of first focus area. Secondly, we're predominantly a customer management business. That's our kind of day-to-day business is managing our customers and making sure that these beverages are available to consumers. So the second area was around customer experience. So how do we help our customers buy and sell products? So that could be in areas like e-commerce and kind of retailer technology. The third area was what we call route to market, which is, again, we're a distribution business, so we have to ship a lot of product from A to B. So the third area was in a world in which it might, for example, be difficult to drive carbon-based vehicles into the center of towns. How do you ship product? So that's things like automated logistics, drones, and so on. And then the final area is what we call sales visibility. So this is how do we use data and analytics around what we're selling, where we're selling it, who we're selling it to help inform the decisions that our business makes and the decisions that our customers make. So those were the 4 areas that we identified, and they're all very close to the core purpose of the business and particularly the kind of commercial challenges and opportunities that we face.
How do you evaluate whether the Ventures arm is doing a good job? How do you think about success for the Ventures arm?
There's really 3 streams. So the first stream comes from the fact that ultimately we're a strategic investment program. So it's not as if CCP had a lot of spare capital lying around and they kind of gave it to me to go and play on the VC markets. It's really around finding technologies and solutions that can help impact our business and the industry. So the first value stream really is around what impact on our business metrics are we able to bring through the application of the technology that we've invested in. So it could be reducing delivery costs, it could be generating new revenue, it could be improving the efficiency in our factories. Right. So kind of stream 1 is what's the value that brings to the business. Stream 2 is then around equity and equity value. So most of our portfolio companies, we will hold some level of equity in, typically a minority holding, somewhere between maybe 5 and 20, 30%. So like any VC model, there's clearly a kind of an equity value gain that you're looking to achieve over time. So that's the second stream. And then the third stream, coming back to sustainability, is how are we able to do the first and the second in a sustainable way? So what's the impact of Ventures as an investment program in the whole? And we look at that both predominantly through the activities of the companies we've invested in, and then through the way in which we operate ourselves.
What are your key takeaways in terms of the progress that you're making as a unit alongside the core Coke business?
Yeah, no, there've been a few, and there've been difficult learnings as well as some great breakthroughs. I think a few of the things. I think first and foremost, we did spend a lot of time in the early days really getting clear on what our purpose is and what our model is. And when you look around the corporate VCs that are out there, there's a real spectrum from much more financially driven, effectively kind of corporate sponsored VC at kind of one end of the spectrum, which really looks at a model that is very close to a pure VC model. And then the other end of the spectrum, you have much more the strategic, almost the kind of venture building model. I mean, we're sat here in Scale Space, which is a great example of that type of venture building model. So we position ourselves much more towards the latter end of the spectrum. So very much the strategic program. And therefore, the way we measure success, as we were discussing, is based on those three streams, which starts with impact on the business. So I think the first kind of key breakthrough, if you like, was real clarity on what it is that we're trying to achieve and how we're trying to do it. And a lot of other elements really sprung from that, because as soon as you've got that clear, then the way you set yourself up in terms of governance, decision making, how you position yourself to the market. I think the second learning was, in an age in which capital is pretty abundant and you have some pretty enormous, well-resourced competitors out there looking to invest in startups, we have to differentiate. We're not going to compete with the SoftBanks and the BlackRocks of the world in terms of financing power. But what we can do, particularly with the Coca-Cola brand, is differentiate in terms of what we can offer startups. So I think the second kind of key learning has been getting the partnership element right and establishing much more of a partnership of equals with the startup, rather than trying to position ourselves as as a kind of slightly distant, large corporate.
Could you give us an overview of the sectors that you are now invested in through the ventures arm, and some of the businesses that you are working with in your portfolio?
Maybe if I start with the sustainability
Absolutely.
area, because that's I think probably most kind of front and center at the moment. So I think in sustainability we looked at two areas, and we looked at all of our company commitments, which are put forward in a plan called This Is Forwards, which is the CCEP sustainability plan. And across each of those areas, so society, climate, drinks, water, and so on, across each of those areas, we looked at where's the overlap with ventures in terms of kind of opportunity and capability. So where did we see a lot of startups coming to us? And where did we feel like we could make the most difference in terms of having an impact in each of those areas? And the two kind of clear ones that came through was packaging. For obvious reasons, we're a business that if you have an innovation in terms of different types of materials, in terms of businesses that can reduce the reliance on single-use plastic, then Coca-Cola, and the kind of the beverage industry is obviously where you're going to go. And then secondly, in terms of carbon footprint. So around 40 to 50% of our carbon footprint comes from our packaging. So that's the second area. So there's a link in there with carbon footprint. So those are the two areas that we focus on.
I wonder if you could just share some of your biggest challenges from the last few years, and then sort of guide us and advise us on what you've done to try and overcome them.
Yeah, no, it's not been the smooth kind of hockey stick growth curve that we see so often when we're being pitched to. But I mean, there's a few things. I think the first was maybe it is the inevitable kind of struggle between perhaps the kind of I don't want to say corporate, because kind of not all corporates are so different, but the risk profile and the need for patience it's a different risk profile to your typical core business decisions. If you just compare the business case you might develop to invest 5 million in a Series A round in a startup versus 5 million in a production line in a factory, you have a very different kind of framework that you apply in terms of the way you think about risk and the way you think about return. And those three value streams that I was talking about, that's not the way in which you would typically evaluate an internal business case. So I think the first is just around risk appetite and finding a way of getting the business comfortable with that kind of risk profile. And I think the reality is there's a real willingness. I think corporates increasingly want to be agile, they want to be tech savvy, they want to be progressive. I think that's all good, and you can see how that's coming across more and more in kind of investor relations kind of communications. But there's still a tension there, so that when push comes to shove and you have to report a failed investment, that's tough. There's still a kind of difficulty in being able to accept that and move on quickly. And there's this mantra of failing fast that I'm sure the kind of VC industry is brilliant at, or I'm sure has fully embraced and is able to accommodate. I think in the corporate world, that's tougher. There's just more reluctance around giving up on things that we feel an accountability for, because that's not the kind of DNA, that's not the culture that typically has got the business to where it's got to. So I think the kind of that risk management, failing fast, that's difficult. So we need to kind of work on that. So I think that's been one challenge. I think the other one in terms of our own journey has probably been around how do we make sure that the partnership model generally creates a kind of mutual benefit. And that's sometimes tricky. We're talking about obviously a big complex company and a small, relatively early stage company. So picking and choosing where we can be of genuine value versus where we're just getting in the way is also a challenge. And that is often just about the kind of dialogue with the startup. It's what's useful, what's not. How do you kind of get the best of both worlds in terms of the infrastructure that we can leverage, the capabilities, the expertise, all that good stuff, but at the same time not overwhelm, not create a kind of dependency issue, which I think can become the challenge. Ultimately, we've invested in companies because we think the startups themselves are run by fantastic people who are who have been able to make things happen, who have, with limited resources, have created a business, found a technology, are already up and running without having a big, kind of corporate sponsor behind them. So we don't want to change that mix. We just want to help them, give them the platform to go faster. But again, that's a skill. That requires a certain amount of experience, a certain amount of kind of insights, a certain approach. So I think that finding that right balance is not easy.